Hello chess fans, this is Rick from Chess to Impress with number 10 in the series Resigning in a Winning Position. Most of the earlier episodes of this series have been games that have been played a long time ago, but this is a very recent one, and I want to thank Matthäus, a faithful supporter of the Chess to Impress channel, for pointing me at this game. The León Rapid event was held in July 2018. León is in the north of Spain, and the format is that there are 4 players who play semi-finals against each other, so it's not an all-play-all event. The 2 semi-finals were Wesley So, the top Grandmaster from the US, against 12-year-old newly crowned Grandmaster Pragnananda Ramesh Babu from India. And the second semi-final was between 2 local players, two Spaniards, Paco Francisco Vallejo Pons and Jaime Santos Latasa. So and Vallejo won their semi-finals and played in the final, which Wesley So won. The resigning in a winning position happened in game 4 of the Vallejo-Santos match. Let's go to that game. The match consisted of 4 rapid games, and if the score was equal there would be blitz tiebreak games. And before this game, Santos Latasa was leading 2-1. He had won 1 game and there were 2 draws. So Vallejo had to win this 4th game to take the match into a tiebreak. It was played on the 7th of July 2018 and Vallejo played d4. He switched to 1d4 in order to avoid a French defense or a Petrov defense, as he mentioned in the press conference. Vallejo Pons is a 35-year-old Grandmaster from Menorca, an island off the east coast of Spain. His opponent played knight f6, and Jaime Santos Latasa is a 22-year-old Grandmaster from Ciudad Naranco from the north of Spain. c4 from Vallejo, e6 from Santos, knight c3 and bishop b4. We have a Nimzo Indian. Queen c2 is one of the main lines, and d5. Vallejo took, and now you can take back with the pawn, which is fine. You can take back with the knight. You can also take back with the queen, because this knight is pinned. It cannot take the queen. And this is the move that Santos chose, taking back with the queen. e3, c5, bishop d2, bishop takes c3, and taking with the bishop is more common according to the database, but Vallejo took with the pawn, which is also fine. Santos castled, and here knight f3 is the main move, played by Grandmasters like Bareyev and Saric, as I saw in the database, and even by Alexander Aljochin in a game against Max Euwe for the World Championships, played in 1937. But Vallejo chooses f3 instead of knight f3 for this game. Queen d6, knight e2, knight c6, knight f4, b6, bishop is being developed, rook to the center. White also places his rook on the central file. Bishop developed and white castled. The final piece is being brought in the game by Santos, and Vallejo's strategy with 1d4 has worked out well, as the position is full of life, and so that's what you want in a must-win game. Queen b2, taking the queen out of the reach of the rook on c8, taking some tactics with taking on d4 out of the position. The rook was eyeing up the queen there. Not anymore. Queen b2. Knight a5 from Santos, bishop to e1, and knight d5. That knight was swapped. Bishop takes, and bishop h4, attacking the rook. So the rook has to play. Rook went to f8. Bishop dropped back to g3, hitting the queen. Queen stepped back. That rook is put on the central file as well, and black took in the center. C takes, knight into c4, attacking the queen. The knight was taken. Bishop takes, and e4, pushing in the center. Queen to B7, and Vallejo pushes on the king sides. B5, A3 and A5. Black pushes his pawn majority on the queen side. The position is about equal. Queen D2, queen comes up, bishop drops back, and now the bishop and the queen are on the same diagonal. Some tactical possibilities. Black keeps pushing his pawn majority, and there comes D5 in the center with a tempo on the black queen. The queen has to play, the queen is attacked, and Vallejo took on B4. A takes, and D takes E6. Now here the engine prefers to swap the queens. Queen takes D2, and then white has an in-between move with a check. E takes F7 check. King takes, and only then take back the queen. But after rook Fd8, the engine says with his passed B pawn, black has compensation for the pawn he's down. And please note that the bishops are of opposite color, which is also a factor why this position is about even. But after D takes E6, Santos did not take on D2, he just took back the pawn with the queen. And now Vallejo won a pawn on B4. But all the pawns are on one side of the board, it's 4 against 3 on the king side, and it's not easy to win this position. The game moves on. Rook Fd8, King H2, H6, Bishop to G3, Bishop to D3, Rook D2, Bishop back. Both players are maneuvering their pieces. White doubles up on the D file. A pair of rooks is swapped. Bishop back to C4, Queen back, Queen E7, Queen centralized, Bishop back to E6. The rook now goes to the B file. Queen comes up, offering a queen trade, and Bishop E5 instead of dropping back with the queen, giving black the chance to swap the queens now. In an article in ChessBase, the author writes, in a superior position, Vallejo chooses to go into a drawish endgame with 4 pawns against 3 on the same flank. In the post-match interview he mentioned that he remembered having a similar position in a Grand Prix event, where his rival finally defended successfully, but also suffered immensely. And that's why Vallejo went into this endgame. The queens were swapped, and Rook D8 hitting the bishop. Rook B4 defending the bishop, Rook D7, H5, F5, E5, that E-pawn is now a passed pawn, Bishop F7 attacking the H5 pawn, and as we'll see, white gives up that H-pawn to create a very far advanced passed pawn with his own E-pawn. This E-pawn will move up the board rapidly, as we'll see. Vallejo first gave a check, King H7, Bishop C5, and there goes the pawn, so white gives his pawn back, but now his E-pawn can come up all the way to E7. E6 hitting the rook, Rook D2, and E7 protected by the bishop. Rook E2, and now black covers the E8 square with both of his pieces to make sure the pawn does not promote. It's still in the balance. Black should still be able to keep this position, to hold this position. It should be a draw, but this is a rapid game and it's move 48, so both players were very low on time, and in a practical game this is hard to defend. King G1, Rook E5 hitting the bishop, Bishop B4, F4, and Rook F8 attacking that F4 pawn. G5 defending the pawn, king comes up, the king needs to help his pieces. Rook E6, G4, that pawn was taken en passant, king takes back, Rook E3, Bishop C5 hitting the rook, rook comes up hitting the bishop, bishop hits the rook again, and the rook hits the bishop again. Bishop B4, Rook E2, and the bishop keeps dancing up and down, waiting for the right moment to strike. White is. Rook E6, Bishop c5, white has to be careful to not allow the same position for the third time, because then black can claim a draw and goes through to the final. Rook e5, rook c8, defending the bishop that way and avoiding any repetition. Rook e6 again, and there comes f4. That pawn was taken. It allows the king into the game now, but of course it swaps another pair of pawns, which makes black's defensive task easier. One of the options that black has is to give his bishop for the e-pawn and then defend the rook versus rook and bishop endgame, which is also a draw. But he doesn't have to go into that yet. He is still controlling the e8 square. King g7, rook back to f8, king back, and king f5. Now the white king comes into the position and it gets very critical. Rook all the way back and bishop d4. White is setting up a mate threat with rook h8. That will be checkmate. Bishop g6 and king f6. Now it's getting really critical. We're on move 66. We're close to the climax. Here bishop h5 is the only move to stay in the game, but here finally black blundered, and instead of bishop h5 he played rook e4, and that's a blunder. Now white is winning. Vallejo played bishop e5, rook back to e2, and here white should have played king e6, hiding behind the bishop. And now black has to move the bishop to avoid being mated. Rook h8 is a checkmate threat, and the only thing you can do is moving your bishop to create a square for the king. But bishop h5 to keep the e8 square protected runs into rook h8 check anyway. The king has to go to g6, and then you can promote your pawn, because the bishop is no longer protecting the e8 square. The king is in the way. This is an easy win for white and something that Vallejo would have seen. But he thought there was another way to win. Let's go back to the game. Rook e2 was played, and here instead of king e6, Vallejo thought for a while and then played rook h8 check. And Santos immediately resigned in a winning position, which would have qualified him for the final. Both players missed that taking the rook, which is the only legal move by the way, is an easy win for black. And when they asked them about it, the two Spaniards said that they had been constantly calculating this line in previous moves. So when Santos saw it on the board, he assumed that this time it worked. And Santos also mentioned that he found out about this mistake before the Blitz games to decide on who would make the final, which of course did not give him a pleasant feeling. It must have influenced his performance during the Blitz games. Sometimes it's better not to know you have blundered. So why is this such a blunder, rook h8? Well, the only legal move, as I said, is to take the rook. White then takes on g6, and it is check. The bishop gives check to the king. So both players must have thought that then black has to play his king, king g8, and then e8 queen is checkmate. And that's why black resigned. And what both players overlooked is that after king takes g6, which is indeed check, that black can just take the piece that is giving check. Rook takes e5, and the e8 square is also controlled. King f7, black just runs with his h-pawn. If white queens, that queen will be taken. King takes h4, and you and I can also win this position against Paco, Vallejo, Pons. Quite an extraordinary finish of this game, and from the live footage I took this picture. You can see Vallejo in full concentration making the move rook h8 check, and immediately afterwards Santos resigned in a winning position. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and please subscribe to the Chess to Impress channel. Please leave a comment, I will read them all and I will reply to them all. You also may want to check out my Chess to Progress channel. The link is in the description box. This is Rick for Chess to Impress. Thank you for watching.